Greetings and welcome back to room 303 in our Talks with Walt, as we are calling our readings through the deathbed edition of Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass. We are in the classic Song of the Open Road, passage number 4. Now, some have argued that Song of the Open Road can essentially be read as a dramatic monologue. And one of the things that makes this passage, number 4, so fascinating is that in some ways it seems as if Whitman is returning back to the ancient classic dialogue format of course, Plato, and especially of Plato's Republic. We'll have more to say about that in a moment, but I would put that in my notes right away. Now, the assumption is that you've been with us at learnstrong.net, down that left-hand side, Talks with Walt, from the very beginning, our introductory comments from inscriptions all the way up, and including our introductory comments to Song of the Open Road, as well as passages 1, 2, and 3. Since in many ways, as we've said in earlier lectures, Whitman is making a certain kind of optimistic argument. Can I say it that way? We're going to see now in passage number 4 here a very interesting dialogue that's going to take place. Now, this is not unusual for us. We'll comment on it later. That you'll remember in Song of Myself, passage 46, you have this kind of dialogue, and it is exhibited through the use of the italics, and we're going to see this as well here. So let's now turn to the poem itself, passage 4, and let's just enjoy this exchange that occurs. The earth expanding right hand and left hand, the picture alive, every part in its best light, the music falling in where it's wanted and stopping where it is not wanted, the cheerful voice of the public road, the gay, fresh sentiment of the road. O highway, I travel. Do you say to me, do not leave me? Do you say, venture not, if you leave me, you are lost? Do you say, I am already prepared, I'm well beaten and undenied, adhere to me? O public road, I say back, I'm not afraid to leave you, yet I love you. You express me better than I can express myself. You shall be more to me than my poem. I think heroic deeds were all conceived in the open air, and all free poems also. I think I could stop here myself and do miracles. I think whatever I shall meet on the road, I shall like, and whoever beholds me shall like me. I think whoever I see must be happy. Now, of course, we're going to finish with this discussion of the word happy. We have said many times in room 303 that, of course, Scooby snacks are an illusion, and yet what a wonderful illusion. And we've also said that Whitman was very influenced by his study of Jefferson's Declaration of Independence. And the fact that the word happy gets used in DOI is going to be important to our study here. Now, let's just begin. Notice we're going to have now the first 4 lines with the word "the" right at the beginning. And again, this amphoria, we've seen it before all the way through Leaves of Grass. The word expanding in the first line, the earth expanding right and left hand, is of course a key word in all of our study of Leaves of Grass. This idea of growth, this idea of expansion, this idea of evolution, all central to our reading, right? And of course, it's going to be at the basis of Whitman's patriotic optimism, as we'll sometimes think of it, the idea that America is this constantly expanding, growing, dynamic civilization, country, nation. Notice the next one, the picture alive. And again, we're back to this notion of growth. Every part in its best light. Think about the fact that the very first photograph is taken in 1826. Go ahead and Google the photographs that were, taken of Whitman during his life. And here, of course, this idea of the picture, the photograph is not the word that he uses, but we'll begin to kind of get a sense. He's capturing some of this newfound interest in, of course, imagery. And here it is alive, the picture alive. And then, of course, we've said it. Whitman loves his music, loved his opera. And so here it's the music, falling in where it's wanted, stopping where it's not wanted. Significant that the title of this poem is Song of the Open Road. That is to say, the idea that there's a time and a place for everything. That Ecclesiastes passage, one that, of course, Whitman loved, a time for everything. And here, there will be time for the music falling in and a time for the music to stop when it is not wanted. And then the cheerful voice. And of course, the 2 lines will go together. Although we needn't just necessarily think about singing in cheerful voice. By the way, notice the word cheerful and how popular it is in our study of Leaves of Grass, one of the most popular words. The cheerful voice of the public road, again, it's this idea of the open road, the public road, the democratic road, the inclusive road. We're going to include everybody. We've seen this earlier in passages of Song of the Open Road. The gay, fresh sentiment of the road. By the way, this will be the first use of the word gay here. And again, gay at this point is not, of course, referencing anything sexual, but we're to the last word of this section, happy, right? The idea of exuberance, we might say optimism and all of that. Fresh sentiment of the road, the idea of the sentiment, the idea that there is something really important that is nourishing about the fundamental idea of Whitman and his view of democracy. And then there's a break. And this use of the word "oh," as we said early on when we started inscriptions, you're going to see this several times in Leaves of Grass. "Oh, highway." Interesting, this is the only use of that word in the entire poem and in all of Leaves of Grass. "Oh, highway I travel, do you say to me," again now, you're going to see this 3 times, the "do you say" formation. And then notice it is in italics, right? "Do you say to me," and then of course the question marks to follow. "Do you say to me, do not leave me? Do you say, venture not," notice the dash, "if you leave me, you are lost." That is to say, Whitman, of course, back to a conversation with himself. Again, go back and take a look at passage 46 of Song of Myself, and you will see there that there is this italicized format where there will be a question that will be asked, and then Whitman will, or Whitman's spirit or soul will respond. "Do you say, I'm already prepared, I am well beaten and undenied, adhere to me." This idea that there's a discussion for Whitman about his soon-to-be departure of foot and light-hearted I take to the open road will tell us that there's some potential self-doubt here. In other words, am I doing the right thing? Obviously at 3B we're already asking this question at the personal level. The great accomplishments of your life had to have involved some sense of questioning, self-doubt, that old notion of counting the cost as it sometimes has been referred to. And then he'll respond, public road, one more time. "I say back," and again we've got this exchange going on. Now Whitman's readers of the day would understand intuitively that Whitman was playing around with dialogue forms, specifically of course referenced through Plato and the study of Plato. Today, of course, we don't study Plato as much, sadly, and so we don't often sense this, oh, he's making an allusion to a very ancient classical tradition where Socrates and Crito or whoever is having this exchange back and forth. Of course, we've given a lot of lectures at LearnStrong.net of the Platonic dialogues, and of course detailed lectures on a number of them, including Republic. You can go and take a look. "Oh, public road, I say back, I'm not afraid to leave you, yet I love you." That is to say, there will be moments that Whitman will decide that he will go on his own. There will be other moments that Whitman will decide, I'm going to travel the road with everybody else. He says, "I'm not afraid to leave you, but I do love you," he says. And then he says something interesting about the public road, and many have constituted this as one of the more important lines if you want to try to understand Whitman in all of Leaves of Grass. He says it this way: "You express me better than I can express myself." His vision of America, we might even say. "You shall be more to me than my poem." Now we have heard this, you're right, we have heard this and the echoes of this all the way from the very beginning in inscriptions. Whitman was acutely aware, as we've said in earlier lectures, Whitman was acutely aware that he was constructing, in some ways, the fundamental national anthem of America. And yet, for Whitman, this America is a new phenomenon. It is an evolving, it is an expanding, to use the language, expanding phenomenon. And so in some ways, Whitman's poem is America, and America is Whitman's poem. That symbiosis, and here he will be playing it. Then we're going to get 4 I thinks. Now this formulation of I think or I believe, again, is one that we've seen a number of times in Leaves of Grass. And then some of the great classic, early classic lines. I mean, there's so many quotable lines from Song of the Open Road. Many readers of this poem have memorized it for that reason. And here's some of the early, really powerful first lines. Let's take a look at them. "I think," he says, Heroic deeds were all conceived in the open air, and all free poems also. By the way, the term heroic deeds will only be used right here, and the term free poems will only be used right here. Notice what he says about heroic deeds, and immediately, this is Whitman tipping his hat, obviously, to Homer and Virgil, right? Those early epic poems in the Western canon that will begin that story of the hero. We obviously think about the Odyssey as our classic example of Odysseus and the Odyssean hero. Heroic deeds were all conceived. This notion of conception, this notion, Immanuel Kant will come into this discussion obviously, this notion of idealism, this notion that there is something profound about coming up with an idea and then acting that idea out. But where do these amazing ideas and these inspirations come from? Well, obviously borrowing heavily from the other transcendentalists of Emerson and Thoreau. He's going to say it all happens in the open air. In other words, inspiration will happen when we get out into the space, into the open air, where we're able to, he's going to talk about breathing deep draughts of air into our lungs. He will say, if we're really looking for inspiration, we got to take a walk. Now, it can be obviously a literal walk, or it can be a metaphysical walk, a figurative walk. He says, I think all free poems were also conceived outside, in the open air. Now, this idea is going to be central to his view of what it means to be an American. Many will, of course, use this idea to celebrate the notion of what it means to be alive, to get out there in the open air and go for a walk. I mean, a number of you have said, since your study of Leaves of Grass, and especially this poem, that when you're sitting there playing on your phone, your instincts are to kind of become sedentary. You'll hear Whitman's challenge to you to get out there in the open air, and all of a sudden you stand up, and several of you have told me you just go for a walk, which is something you haven't done for a very long time. Walk to the park, and as one of you told me, I literally went to the park and I sat on a swing and I was swinging for a while, and I was somehow trying to come back to this notion of my childhood and the enthusiasm and the excitement of being at the park in my childhood. For Whitman, going through an activity like that is going to allow you to conceive of heroic deeds and also free poems. The notion of a free poem will be, of course, for Whitman central, because he wants his Leaves of Grass to be free. Unbounded, you'll go back to those opening lines of Song of Myself, passage 1. All right, I'm going to accept what others have to say, but I'm going to go ahead and make up my own mind. We're going to see this a whole lot more in passages 5 and 6 to come. In some ways, these lines are the setup for what we're about to hear. Some of the most precious lines of Song of the Open Road are here in passages 5, 6, and in many ways this is set up. I think I could stop here myself and do miracles. Now, 2 observations here. The word here is one that Whitman, as we've said many times, loves, because there's an immediacy to that one. I am right here, right now, right? And he'll say it in the opening lines of Song of Myself, passage 46, which I told you guys, you have to know that set of lines to really appreciate what's going on in Song of the Open Road. And he'll say it, I know I have the best of time and space. It was never measured and never will be measured. Now, he says, is the very best of times. And then the second thing I want to point out about this line, I think I could stop here myself and do miracles. This idea of miracles, the miraculous, something unbelievable is happening, will be for Whitman central to the whole project of Leaves of Grass. And of course, as we said in our very earliest lectures, the very fact that we are reading today and studying Leaves of Grass is itself a miracle. On so many levels, it is a miracle, especially by virtue of the fact that it was marginalized and maligned very early on. Whitman could have just quit and said, bag it, I'm done. But he didn't. And the fact that he didn't is itself kind of miraculous, we might say, right? I think whatever I shall meet on the road, I shall like, and whoever beholds me shall like me. Just to go back to this idea of capturing the miraculous, for those of you who are saying, I know I've heard this echo, you're right. Starting from Pomenog, passage 12, all the things of the universe are perfect miracles, he says. And this idea, I want to point out the way Whitman loves to take religious language and make it somehow common language. Not to denigrate it. I don't think that that's at all what he's doing. I don't think he's trying to lessen it. I think he's trying to be more expansive in his use of the language. And then notice here that whatever I shall meet on the road I shall like, and whoever beholds me shall like me. Now we have a certain kind of hopeful optimism in play here. It all is about attitude. Have you heard this? In many ways, the self-help movement started, obviously, during Whitman's lifetime. Many have looked at Leaves of Grass as a self-help manual. I mean, I did comment that I believe Whitman thought of Leaves of Grass as the New American Bible. And a part of that project is this notion of you begin with an attitude that says, I'm going to experience something amazing today. I'm going to experience something that's really important and hopeful. As we said, Shelley's Song of the Ode to the West Wind is central to, I think, a whole lot of the enterprise of Leaves of Grass. If winter come, can spring be far behind, you'll remember as the conclusion of that poem, the idea that there's always reason to hope because there's the open road. There's the ability to change your life. Again, to go back to Whitman's fundamental theodicy, the question of pain and suffering in the world, our instincts are always asked, why did this happen to me? To somehow see ourselves as a victim. And Whitman will challenge us to ask the question again in a different way. And he believes the open road and the travel in the open road will allow this. Why did this happen? For me. The ability to learn and gain from the experience. He says, fourth, number 3, I think whoever I see must be happy. Now, this notion of whoever I see must be happy leads many readers of this poem and the collection of poems, Leaves of Grass, to kind of label Whitman as a blind optimist. That is to say, he's going to say everything he sees is full of joy and happiness, and that obviously cannot be the case. We have a lot of sadness, we have a lot of sorrow in Leaves of Grass. We'll obviously get to the famous lines regarding the death of the great President Lincoln. But I think the point here that should be made is that Whitman is going to say, my first premise is that there's something fundamentally common, can we say democratic? Something fundamentally common about being an American citizen or being a citizen of the world. We'll get to Passage to India later, as we said in our Salutamon. That all humans have fundamentally a desire for joy, for happiness. He says, I think there must be buried within us this longing for happiness. Think about the fact that the word happy gets used at least 25 times in Leaves of Grass to tell us just how precious and important an idea or concept it is. And again, we're referencing the DOIs he often spoke of. What an amazing thing that our most precious founding document will use the word happy or happiness twice. It's quite a remarkable thing. Well, how are we going to finish this at 2A? Themes and messages. Well, obviously the challenge of self-doubt is to overcome it by actually getting up and going for that traveling of the open road. And once we start out, we never lie by again. You'll remember that he says in passage 46 of Song of Myself. There is such a thing as healthy optimism. And I think in today's moment, this is central to hear from Whitman. Yes, there's a lot that's terrible. Yes, there's a lot that's tragic. No question about it. We are not doing what, although the reference for most of you is lost, Pollyanna, you can go back and run that one to ground, what that actually means. Older readers of the poem will understand what I mean when I say Pollyanna optimism. This is not what Whitman is advocating. A certain kind of healthy optimism is certain to this, and that's how one overcomes self-doubt. Just for a moment at 3A, remember Dickinson's poem, Hope is the Thing with Feathers. We've given a full lecture on it at learnstrong.net. The same idea is obviously there. At 2B, we've mentioned the idea at rhetoric, not what Whitman says, but how he says it. We've mentioned the idea of the dialogue, the repetitions, I think, 4 times. At 3A, I've mentioned Song of Myself, passage 46. I said to my spirit, and my spirit said. We've seen this give and take before. And as well, of course, for you at 3A, what is the text? Think about this. On your playlist, what is the text that you listen to? What is the text that convinces you, let's go, it's okay, let's go, that builds your confidence, that builds your hope? And think about this. If you don't have a song on your playlist that tells you, come on, this is going to be all right, we're going to be fine, we're going to get through this, what's that say about your playlist? And you might want to pick up some songs that are inspiring. Of course, in terms of poems in 303, two immediately come to mind. We have to think about Longfellow's Psalm of Life, a text obviously Whitman knew, right? Tell me not in mournful numbers, life is but an empty dream, for the soul is dead that slumbers, and things are not what they seem. Life is real, life is earnest, and the grave is not its goal. Dust thou art, to dust returnest. Was not spoken of the soul. We've given, of course, full lecture at learnstrong.net on that one. Think about Dante, the pilgrim. He is tired. He sits down. And of course, in Canto 24 of Inferno, it is Virgil that says, up on your feet. This is no time to tire. We've given full lectures as well on that passage and all of Divine Comedy at learnstrong.net. Whitman read the classics this way, that there is Achilles sitting in his tent in Iliad 9, not certain that he's wanting anymore to engage in life, and then he has to do it. He has to get up and he has to go. I think there's a whole lot of that here in Song of the Open Road. Finally, at 3B, how are we going to own a poem like this, make it our own? Is it best to start out, you do believe, optimistically or skeptically? And how do you cover your own self-doubt? Fascinating ideas. Thank you.